spoke with Chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff. Congressman Schiff, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
I mean, of all the crises that you've all been grappling with, of all the roller coaster in politics and everything over the last several years, did you ever think you'd get to this point where a virus is literally melting markets and social conduct and everything?
I think we've always known that this was a possibility, as we've seen over the last several years, SARS and MERS and other public health challenges, of course, the Ebola crisis. But this is new and unprecedented, certainly, in terms of the impact on our economy, as well as just how quickly this virus is spreading and how little we know about it. So, yes, it does add to a remarkable and growing list of fairly unprecedented challenges facing the country, the Congress, and this administration.
And, you know, many people might not realize that actually even in Congress you can be infected. There are, I think, a half dozen members who have tested positive, including President Trump's incoming chief of staff, Congressman Meadows. How difficult is it for all of you? Are you getting the testing kits? What is the protocol right where you are?
Well, as far as I know, we don't have any testing kits here. Now, that may change or have changed, but we are, I think, in a profession that is very difficult during this kind of a crisis, just in terms of interacting with our constituents, holding public events, and frankly, just restraining the urge to shake everyone's hand cuts very much against the grain for an elected official. But we're trying to figure out how do we disseminate to our constituents the best information from the CDC, from the NIH and other agencies. Probably among the most important roles that we have in Congress right now, in addition to funding some of the infrastructure changes, the preparation, the testing that's necessary, the development of vaccines, is to simply be purveyors of good information to our constituents. There is, I think, few dangers as grave as misinformation during a crisis like this. People are hungry for good information, and that's part of the important role we have to play.
You are having meetings today to talk about potential economic help for those who are suffering the most. It looks like the Democrats want to really help with sick pay and with all sorts of other things that protect workers. The administration is kind of interested in helping various companies and businesses, the tourism industry. Where do you think a consensus will develop?
Well, we've seen before when we have a crisis in this country that there are good solutions that can help improve the economy or help serve as a bridge to get us to better times. And then there are others who would essentially use the crisis to try to advance a policy agenda unrelated to the crisis, but for which they think they can make a case. I think it's very important that we focus on what will work. We incentivize the right kind of behavior. For example, we don't want people who are sick to go to work. But if they can't afford not to, if they have no unemployment or they have no sick leave and they're forced to expose themselves while sick to other people, that's obviously not in anyone's interest. So making sure that there's paid sick leave, making sure that people that are temporarily unemployed because of the reduction in demand for their services in a crisis like this have the kind of support they need. They will put that money back into the economy immediately, so it's also an economic boost. But unrelated tax cuts that people have been pushing in good times and bad times, in sickness and in health, that's not the answer. I think we want to focus on creating the right incentives and also providing the country this economic lifeline at a time when the economy is very much on a precipice.
The president had asked for somewhere in the region of $2 billion from Congress, and last week you gave him $8 billion and he signed the bill, or more than $8 billion. Are you convinced that this is going to the right areas? We talked to the chief advisor to the WHO, who's been to China, and he said that, what we can learn from China is that they did this whole government approach. In other words, all the arms of government and the public space was directed to one issue, and that is trying to contain and control this virus. Is that even possible in a country like the United States? Do you think it's necessary?
I do think it's necessary. I do think it's possible, although not in the kind of draconian ways that China used in terms of going out and forcibly grabbing people off the street and throwing them into metal boxes on the backs of trucks. We don't want to use some of those harsh tactics employed by China, but we should use our own kind of whole-of-government approach that begins with the dissemination of good information from the administration and from Congress, from health experts about what they should do, what they shouldn't do, that also calls on people to exercise good judgment, good precautions, that at the federal, state, and local level brings about changes that will help get us through these difficult economic times, provide for families that are struggling to get by during this crisis, that also provides the resources to strengthen the health infrastructure, to make sure that people aren't afraid to get tested because they can't afford the test, or they can't afford, if the test is positive, whatever treatment might be necessary. So we do need that kind of whole-of-government approach, even if it's not the one employed by China. We need our own whole-of-government within a democratic system approach to this challenge.
So let me ask you, because Italy is a democratic country, and it has just announced a total national lockdown, except for emergency requirements. Is that possible? I know Italy is about a quarter of the population of the United States, but is that possible or even thinkable in the U.S. if it starts to become as serious as it has been in Italy?
You know, I think we need to look to our health experts, and it may be that we don't know yet enough about the virus to know the efficacy of different, severe kind of travel restrictions like Italy has employed. It may be premature to reach a judgment like that, but there are probably a whole set of intermediary steps that we should look for different benchmarks in terms of the progression of the virus and say, okay, it's gotten to this point, we now need to deploy these kind of protections. We need to urge communities to do this. We need to cancel all large sporting events. We need to cancel all large conferences, not simply rely on an ad hoc basis. We need to make these different changes to our mass transit systems. So we ought to be developing those contingencies now, thinking through those contingencies now. We lost precious time, I think, when the administration was engaged in a bunch of happy talk, when the president was saying, or members of his cabinet, that we've locked down the country, it's airtight, things that were not good science, plainly unrealistic. And I think it meant that we didn't develop the test kits as fast as we should have. We haven't gotten those contingency plans set. But I would hope that we never get to the point where we have to even contemplate a step like Italy. But we now need to think about, okay, what do we do as this virus progresses, as we see whether the change in temperature in the summer affects it in the way we hope or it doesn't. That's the kind of planning we need to be doing now.
You know that there's a lot of politics and nationalism even connected with any issue, but now this issue. And there are many people who say, oh, well, look, this virus proves the point that there shouldn't be open borders and indiscriminate travel and et cetera, et cetera. Well, what do you say to people who are saying that right now?
Well, this, gets to a broader point that we were discussing earlier, which is people will use any crisis as a way of furthering their policy arguments or their prejudices, frankly, that are completely unrelated to the immediate health crisis. So, people that are xenophobic, that are prejudiced against others, that are discriminatory against people who don't look like them, they're going to use this, try to exploit this to heighten fear, anger, loathing of anyone who looks different. And we all have responsibility to push back against that pernicious bias, bile, prejudice, and racism. And I think it's at times like this when there is some hysteria about the health challenges we face, that it's most important that we push back against these racist attacks because they're dangerous. What they end up doing is having people take steps that make the problem far worse. So I think this is going to call on all of us now to push back against those kind of exploitation simply to raise people's fears of the other.
Congressman, obviously we're in the middle of this Democratic primary race, and today has been yet another, it's not a Super Tuesday, it's maybe a mini Tuesday, I don't know, but significant voting in 6 states. There's all sorts of question about whether big rallies should take place, as we were discussing, large gatherings. But more to the point, you have 2 Democratic candidates now facing off. I guess, is it fair to ask you who you think would be better at dealing with this kind of health emergency or national security emergency? Because it's all sort of an economic emergency. It's all tailored into one, really.
You know, I haven't made an endorsement yet, so I'm not sure that I can recommend someone at this point. Given that the impeachment trial that I was helping to manage involved a smear attack on one of the candidates, Joe Biden, I think it made sense for me to stay out of the presidential race so that it couldn't be used as an argument either for or against the impeachment case. But look, I think that the American people need to look for the person that can best deal with economic challenges that have arisen, that can best put out good information, good plans for the healthcare challenges that we face that are now, I think, revealed in even greater detail and extent by the challenges posed by the coronavirus. And I'll say one other thing, because this is something that I really feel our candidates should be advocating from start to finish, and that is a return to basic decency in this country. I think there's a real hunger for a return to decency, to get away from the kind of bitter divisions that the current president seems to enjoy stoking on a daily basis. Those are the character traits that I would look for in the next president of the United States.
Did you want to make an endorsement on our program right now?
No, I don't think I'm ready to do that yet, but thank you for the invitation.
So let me ask you, because this is serious, and that is that some people have said we need also to return to the notion of sort of globalization. And I don't mean that in the sort of political way that's being used as a football, but you know, it's an all world, it's an all globe response to this virus. Do you think the United States is actually now looking to the nations, and China is one of them, that has seen this outbreak, watched it peak, and now is seeing it crest and decrease, according to all the health officials? Is there something that the U.S. can learn from China?
Well, I would say a couple of things. First of all, we have to be able to work and cooperate with other nations, including China, that are seen as rivals and others that are seen as adversaries. We need to be able to compartmentalize and say, okay, we're going to have our differences on trade or on this, but when it comes to a global health crisis or challenge or potential pandemic, we need to find a way to work together. You know, China's got a mixed record on this. They resisted for a long time allowing the WHO in. I think they've resisted for a long time allowing American health experts to try to help diagnose and learn more about the virus that would benefit both China and the rest of the world. So their performance is mixed. But I will say this: this is a time where I think the world is really suffering from a deficit of American leadership. In the past, I think you would have seen a U.S. president as the global leader in this area, as in so many others, respected around the world, and where the rest of the world would have confidence in the recommendations made by the U.S. president. It is not how the world feels about this president, and it makes us, I think, less able to deal with this crisis because we live in a global environment, but it also, I think, has really costs around the world as well, this decline of American leadership represented by this president.
Let's talk quickly about election security, because that's obviously in your wheelhouse very much, as well as all these other issues. And there are concerns about what could happen in terms of interference in this 2020 cycle. The Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, which is within the administration responsible for election oversight, was supposed to have plans in place by January to protect state and local elections, but they missed their deadline, according to the government report. Can you just tell us now how you assess the state of readiness and security for these elections, whether it's now with the primaries or whether it's, the general election?
Well, I don't think we're anywhere near where we should be. Every polling station in America should have a paper trail, and there are still many significant ones that do not. I think that's negligence on its face. We, I think, are going to have an increasing struggle to make sure that we get good information out to the American people about foreign efforts to interfere in our affairs. The last time Congress was briefed, on the matter. The president fired the head of the intelligence agencies for doing his job, and that is to keep Congress fully and presently informed on foreign threats to our elections. Now, today, we are having a House-wide briefing for members on the threat to our election security, and it will be given by members of the administration, and I will have a role in that all-hands briefing. The president, though, is out tweeting, basically trying to suggest that there will be bad information provided at this. It's his own people that will be providing that information to Congress, and the president doing that yet again today sends a chilling message out to the intelligence community and to other agencies that they dare not speak candidly if it contradicts the president's preferred narrative of things. That's dangerous for our election security. It's dangerous for our public health when it's coronavirus. It's dangerous for our democracy when it concerns the next election.
So as we're talking right now, the president has in fact tweeted saying there's going to be another Russia election briefing headed by, quote unquote, the corrupt Adam Schiff. And as you know, his acting director of national intelligence, Richard Grenell, is not even attending this briefing that you're talking about. What do you make of the president's tweets and the fact that his own people are not attending, or at least this particular person?
Well, look, the fact that Grenell is not attending will probably help us get good information because he's not really qualified for that position to begin with. But this is a briefing for the entire membership of the House that was organized by the Speaker. And yes, I'll have a role in moderating the questions that come from House members of both parties. But those testifying are administration witnesses. These are the president's own people. So here the president is on Twitter essentially impugning his own people. And this is sadly what we've come to see from this president, which is he doesn't want Congress informed of foreign threats. He doesn't want the American people informed of foreign threats, particularly threats coming from Russia, because he believes it all poses a threat to his legitimacy. But it's dangerous for the country to go into another election ill-informed about what foreign nations like Russia are doing to try to influence outcomes, to try to influence votes, or try to influence the voting technology. So we're going to do everything we can, both today and until November, to make sure that the intelligence community speaks truth to power. But things like the president is doing today only make that more difficult. The president's profound insecurity is threatening our elections because he doesn't want good information disseminated to the American people.
Congressman Adam Schiff, thank you so much.
Thank you.